They thought Crescent Bay was just another quiet town, until three men walked into a small cafe and threatened the life of a young woman. What they didn't know was that a former U.S. Navy
Don't
operator
scream!
was walking
Tell us where
nearby,
it is!
carrying shadows of war,
Please, I
and a
don't know what you're
dog who had
talking
already
about.
saved his life once. When Mia screamed, Leon didn't move, but Echo did. The loyal Malinois launched himself like lightning, protecting the innocent with the same courage that once kept Leon alive on foreign soil. And that one act would change all their lives forever. If you believe heroes still walk among us, sometimes on two legs, sometimes on four, subscribe, like, and share this story to support more moments of courage and faith. A cold mist drifted across the quiet shoreline of Crescent Bay as dawn struggled to break through a pale gray sky. Leon Taylor walked along the narrow coastal road with the steady pace of a man who had spent most of his adult life marching under orders. He was 34 years old, tall with a solid, muscular frame shaped by years of military conditioning. His shoulders were broad, posture straight, and movements controlled with the disciplined sharpness of a Navy man who had never quite stepped out of formation. His skin was lightly tanned from deployments under brutal sun, but the lines at the corners of his eyes were carved by fatigue, not age. His short black hair, always clipped neatly, matched the trimmed stubble on his jaw. His face, angular with a strong jawline and narrow nose, carried the hardened expression of someone who had looked danger in the eye too many times. Yet behind the steel-colored eyes, he carried a quiet, unspoken melancholy, a heaviness he did not show in words but wore like an invisible uniform. Beside him trotted Echo, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois with a powerful athletic build, thick sable-brown coat, black muzzle, and ears always alert. Echo carried himself with the precise discipline of a military working dog, trained for high-risk operations and conditioned to obey without hesitation. His stride was confident yet fluid, his senses always scanning the surroundings even here, in a peaceful coastal town far from battlefields. Echo had a faint scar along his left shoulder, a thin slash through the fur, one of the many injuries he had earned while side by side with Leon in operations overseas. Leon glanced at him sometimes, as if drawing strength from the dog's unwavering loyalty. The two moved as one unit, breathing in sync, bound by shared wounds that were deeper than flesh. Leon had returned from Yemen only 6 months ago, discharged after an explosion during a hostage extraction, left him with a fractured rib and lingering nerve damage. The physical injuries had healed, but the mental ones had not. The things he had seen, the sounds of gunfire ripping through concrete, the shouts of civilians, the moment he thought Echo had died, played in his mind like a broken tape. He had lost 3 men in that mission, men he had trained with, men he had eaten with, laughed with, men he couldn't save. When the nightmares came at night, he woke with his jaw clenched so tightly that his teeth ached and his palms bleeding, where he had unconsciously dug his nails into them. Echo always sensed it, always pressed his warm body against Leon's leg, or rested his head near Leon's chest until the shaking stopped. It was the only thing that ever stopped it. Crescent Bay had been his choice for a new life. A quiet seaside town with weathered wooden houses and small shops. The kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors nodded politely but didn't pry. Leon valued that. He valued silence, valued distance. He did not want pity, and he did not want questions. He only wanted a place to breathe. His new home sat at the far end of Harbor Street, a small wooden cabin with peeling white paint and a crooked porch swing. It had been his grandfather's house once, and now it was his. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and old memories. He had spent the last few weeks repairing the broken windows, sanding the floors, and fixing the leaking roof. Manual work helped him think, or rather, helped him not think. Echo always followed him from room to room, as if inspecting the repairs himself. Leon appreciated the company more than he admitted. Today, as the mist thinned and the distant waves crashed against the shore, Leon took a slow breath and let the cold air fill his lungs. His chest tightened slightly, a ghost of the injury, but he ignored it. He had learned to ignore many things. He paused near a wooden railing overlooking the beach. Echo sat beside him automatically, tail still, ears perked. This place, it's quiet, Leon murmured, though Echo was the only one there to hear. Too quiet sometimes. Echo didn't respond, of course, but the dog turned his head and nudged Leon's hand with his nose. Leon smirked faintly and scratched the fur behind Echo's ear. It was one of the few moments his face softened. His voice, when he spoke to Echo, always carried something human, something fragile. As they walked back toward town, he passed by a few early rising locals, a fisherman unloading nets by the pier, a middle-aged woman jogging with headphones, and an elderly man sweeping the sidewalk outside a bakery. These were simple people with simple mornings. They greeted Leon with nods or polite smiles, and he returned the gestures with curt, respectful dips of his chin. They didn't ask who he was. They didn't ask why he walked with a military working dog, and that was exactly why he had chosen Crescent Bay. At noon, Leon returned to the cabin. The interior was still modest: a wooden dining table, a couple of worn-out chairs, a battered sofa that had seen better days. But it felt like a sanctuary to him. Echo padded in behind him, sniffing around the room before settling near the fireplace. Leon filled the kettle and set it on the stove. In the small mirror above the sink, he caught his own reflection. He saw a man who had once been unbreakable but now carried fractures beneath the surface. He saw the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the pale scar along his ribs under the shirt, and the tension constantly gripping his shoulders. He hardly recognized the man staring back. "You're not that guy anymore," he whispered under his breath, a confession to no one. A sudden thump startled him. Echo stood up quickly, eyes alert, ears pricked forward. The dog stared at the door, posture tense. Leon froze, his instincts switching on instantly. Breathing slowed, eyes narrowed, muscles coiling in readiness. Then came another sound, a small cardboard box sliding against the porch. Echo relaxed slightly, though his tail still stiffened. Leon exhaled and opened the door. A postal worker stood outside, a man in his late 20s with shaggy blonde hair, a round face, and a friendly but slightly nervous smile. He wore a blue delivery uniform, jacket zipped up against the cold. "Sorry, man," the worker said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't mean to startle you. Package for, Mr. Leon Taylor?" His eyes flicked to Echo with a mixture of caution and fascination. Echo stared back silently, unblinking like a trained sentinel. Leon stepped forward. "That's me." His voice was calm, but had that deep, commanding tone that naturally made people straighten their posture. The postal worker handed over the box. "Dog's intense," he said with an awkward chuckle. "Looks like he's ready to jump into action at any moment." Leon's gaze softened. "He's trained to protect," he replied, "but he won't hurt you unless he needs to." "Good to know," the worker murmured, taking a step back. "Have a good day, sir." Leon nodded, and the man hurried down the porch. Echo huffed quietly as if pleased to see him go. Leon closed the door, set the package on the table, and inhaled deeply. Even small surprises triggered adrenaline now. He hated that. Hated the way his body reacted before his mind had time to think. Hated that peaceful places still felt like battlefield edges to him. He returned to the mirror and met his own eyes again. He didn't speak this time, but he knew the truth. He had not fully come home yet. Later that evening, Leon sat by the fireplace while Echo lay at his feet. Flames flickered across the walls, casting shadows that sometimes resembled figures from his past. Teammates he had lost, enemies he had fought, civilians he couldn't save. His breath tightened, but he forced himself to stay present. He placed a steady hand on Echo's back, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of the dog's breathing. Echo stirred slightly, then pressed closer. Leon closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the dog anchor him to the moment. "You're the reason I made it back," he whispered. "You always were." Echo didn't move, except for a gentle wag of his tail. For a few seconds, the shadows in Leon's mind faded. As night settled over Crescent Bay, Leon went to bed, Echo lying on a thick blanket beside him. Moonlight seeped through the window, illuminating the small room. Just as he started to drift into sleep, the familiar nightmare clawed its way back. The explosion in Yemen, the screams, the chaos, Echo disappearing in the smoke. Leon jolted awake, breath ragged, body drenched in sweat. Echo immediately sat up, leaning into him. Leon reached out, gripping the dog's fur tightly until the trembling stopped. The room was silent again. Leon stroked Echo's head slowly. "We're here," he muttered, more to himself than to Echo. "We're home." We're safe." Echo licked his wrist as if to reassure him. Leon lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't return easily, but he closed his eyes anyway, holding on to the one truth that eased the ache in his chest. He was not alone, and because of Echo, he still had a chance to rebuild. In-story summary at the end of the chapter. Leon Taylor returns to Crescent Bay seeking peace after a traumatic mission in Yemen, accompanied by Echo, the military dog who saved his life. Though he tries to rebuild a quiet life, memories of war haunt him. Echo remains his only anchor, reminding him that despite the shadows of the past, they are alive and together. The amber glow from the cafe windows spilled over the wet pavement like warm honey, cutting through the cold drizzle drifting across Crescent Bay's evening streets. Leon Taylor paused at the corner, Echo sitting obediently at his side, raindrops collecting on the dog's sable coat. It had become part of their routine, an evening stop at Amber Brew, the one place where Leon felt his chest loosen just enough for him to breathe fully. When he pushed open the glass door, a gentle chime sounded. The scent of roasted coffee beans and vanilla pastries rose from the warm air inside. The cafe was small and cozy, decorated with wooden tables, hanging copper lamps, and shelves filled with handmade mugs. A soft tune hummed from a vintage speaker at the back, an old folk song, mellow and soothing. Behind the counter stood Mia. She looked up instantly, her face lighting with a smile that never felt forced. Mia was 28, with a slender figure and graceful movements. Her chestnut brown hair was loosely tied in a messy bun, a few strands framing her soft, heart-shaped face. She had warm amber eyes that always seemed to carry a hint of curiosity and kindness. Her skin was lightly freckled, giving her a youthful and approachable look. She wore a simple cream-colored apron over a navy sweater, and though she wasn't tall, just around 5'4", she had a presence that warmed the room. "Leon and Echo!" she exclaimed, leaning slightly over the counter as Echo trotted forward. "My favorite duo!" Echo's tail thumped immediately against the floor. Even as a trained military working dog, Echo had a soft spot for Mia, and Leon suspected it had everything to do with the tiny bag of homemade peanut butter biscuits she kept hidden under the register. "Evening," Leon said, his voice low but more relaxed than usual. "Rain's picking up." "Perfect excuse to hide here," Mia replied, reaching down to give Echo a scratch on the head. "Hi, handsome boy." Echo stood still, accepting her affection like a soldier receiving a medal. Leon shook water from his jacket and sat at his usual seat near the window. Echo settled beside him. Mia brought over a steaming mug of dark roast coffee, a slice of lemon loaf, and, quietly, placed a single biscuit on a napkin that she accidentally dropped under the table. Leon raised a brow. Mia shrugged innocently. "I can't help it. He looks at me like he knows all my secrets." Leon allowed a faint smile. "He probably does." For a few minutes, the cafe was filled only with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. A few regular customers sat scattered across the room. An elderly woman knitting beneath a lamp, a college-age boy hunched over a laptop, and a middle-aged man in a brown jacket reading a newspaper. Leon sat quietly, observing without staring, an old habit he couldn't shake. In the reflection of the window, he saw Mia working behind the counter, adjusting cups, wiping down surfaces, humming softly. She was gentle, but not fragile. There was a steadiness in her gaze that reminded Leon of nurses he had seen in field hospitals, those who carried kindness in one hand and quiet courage in the other. Echo suddenly perked his ears. Leon followed his gaze to the door. A delivery girl entered, young, perhaps 19, petite with dyed green streaks in her black hair, wearing a waterproof jacket and carrying a crate of bottled syrups. Her expression was polite but reserved. She nodded at Mia and went toward the storage room. "That's Lila," Mia explained as she walked past Leon's booth. "She started working here part-time last month. Pretty shy, but sweet." Leon nodded. He didn't comment further. He wasn't one for small talk, but Mia didn't seem to mind. She knew how to approach him, carefully, softly, never pushing him to give more than he wanted. After wiping her hands on a towel, she leaned against the opposite side of his booth. "So, how's the house coming along?" she asked. Leon sipped his coffee. "Slow, but Echo likes supervising." Echo barked once in agreement. Mia laughed. "I can imagine. I bet he has opinions about your choice of furniture." "He does," Leon said with a straight face. "He rejected the first couch." "He did not." "He did. sat beside it, and refused to get on it. I returned it the next day. Mia covered her mouth, laughing silently. Leon allowed himself a moment to admire the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, gentle, unguarded, honest. But the moment didn't last long. The door opened again, and 3 unfamiliar men walked in. Their presence immediately shifted the room's atmosphere. They didn't look like locals. The first was tall and lanky, around 30, with dirty blonde hair slicked back and a thin, bony face. His nose was slightly crooked, as if it had been broken before and never set right. His skin was pale, and his eyes held a nervous sharpness. He wore a black hoodie under a worn leather jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets. The second man was shorter and heavier, with a round belly pressing against his gray sweatshirt. His hair was shaved close to the scalp, and he had a patchy beard covering his jawline. His expression was blank, almost bored, but his fingers tapped incessantly against his thigh, betraying restlessness. The third man looked older, perhaps mid-40s, with a weathered face and sunken cheeks. He had thinning brown hair, deep-set eyes, and a faded tattoo creeping up the side of his neck. His walk was slow but rigid, like someone accustomed to intimidation. The lanky man scanned the room before smirking at Mia. "Evening, sweetheart," he drawled. Mia stiffened, her smile quickly fading. She straightened her apron, keeping her tone polite but cold. "Evening? Can I help you?" "Yeah," he replied. "You can get us 3 coffees. Black. And maybe a smile to go with it." Leon's jaw tightened subtly. Echo sensed it and leaned forward, ears alert but posture still relaxed. Mia nodded reluctantly and turned toward the counter. The older man stepped closer to look at the pastry display, his fingers tapping the glass. "Prices here went up," he muttered. "Place like this shouldn't be charging so much." The heavy-set man chuckled under his breath. Maybe someone should remind them. Leon's eyes narrowed. He had seen this type before, men who fed on fear, who tested boundaries in quiet places like this. Mia returned with the coffees, but when the lanky man reached for his wallet, he paused. "Actually," he said, "we're a little short today. Think you can spot us?" Mia hesitated. "I'm sorry, I can't do that." "Come on," he said, leaning closer. "It's just 3 coffees. You wouldn't want us to think you're unfriendly." His tone held an unmistakable edge. Leon's hand tightened around his mug. Echo's muscles rippled beneath his fur, ready to rise if Leon gave the smallest cue. But Mia responded before Leon even moved. "I'm sorry," she repeated firmly. "If you can't pay, I can't serve." The lanky man's fake smile vanished. He leaned forward, invading her space. "Listen to me!" Leon stood. The movement was calm, deliberate, but powerful. His full height, 6'2" of disciplined strength, cast a shadow across the room. Echo rose with him, positioning himself between Leon and the strangers. The cafe went silent except for the rain outside. Leon's voice was low, steady, and cold. "She said no." The lanky man turned, his grin returning but strained. "What's this? The guard dog speaks?" "Pay or leave." Leon's tone never changed. The heavy-set man shrugged. "Relax, we were just having fun." The older man tugged at the sleeve of the lanky one. "Let's go, not worth it." They backed away slowly, though their eyes lingered on Leon and Mia. The door chimed again as they left. Only after they disappeared around the corner did Mia exhale a shaky breath. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't want to make a scene." "You didn't," Leon replied, taking his seat again. "They did." She laughed weakly and returned behind the counter. For the next hour, the cafe's calm returned. Mia served the remaining customers, Lila restocked supplies, and the rain softened into a gentle drizzle. But something weighed on Mia's mind. When the last customer left, she approached Leon's booth, hesitating before speaking. "Those men, they've been around a few times." Leon remained silent, waiting. "Not just here," she continued. "Other shops too. They show up at odd hours, ask questions, hang around. Yesterday they were at the flower shop down the street. Mrs. Rena told me they made her uncomfortable." Leon kept his gaze on her. "What do they want?" "I don't know, but people are nervous." She looked toward the dark windows. This town has never had problems like that before. Leon felt something tighten in his chest, not fear, but familiarity. This was the kind of unease that often preceded worse things. "Were they here last night?" he asked. Mia nodded. "They didn't say much, just stared at the register and asked what time I closed." She forced a small smile, trying to lighten her own fear. "Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe they're just troublemakers passing through." "You're not overreacting," Leon interrupted. His tone was calm but firm. "Be careful. Don't stay here alone late." Mia's eyes softened. "I won't. Not anymore." Echo nudged her hand gently, sensing her worry. She bent down to pet him. "You're a good boy, Echo." Leon watched the two of them, Echo leaning into her touch, Mia relaxing slightly, and felt something warm push aside the shadows inside him. When he finally stood to leave, Mia walked him to the door. "Thank you again," she murmured, "for stepping in." "Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head. "Not everyone." Echo nudged Leon's leg, signaling it was time to go. They stepped out into the cool night air. The rain had eased, but the streets glistened under the streetlights. As they walked home, Echo stayed especially close, occasionally glancing behind them. Leon said nothing, but he felt it too. Something had shifted tonight. Something was coming, and he needed to be ready. In-story summary. Leon and Echo visit Amber Brew Café and grow closer to Mia, its warm-hearted owner. However, their peaceful evening turns tense when three suspicious men arrive, harassing Mia and hinting at intimidation. Leon intervenes quietly, earning their attention. Later, Mia confides that these men have been frequenting nearby shops and unsettling the neighborhood. Leon senses trouble on the horizon and becomes increasingly alert. Night had settled over Crescent Bay like a heavy blanket, the streets washed in silvery moonlight and long shadows stretching beneath dim street lamps. A cold breeze pushed through the narrow alleys, carrying the smell of sea salt and wet pavement. It was close to closing time at Amber Brew Café, and only a faint amber glow remained inside as Mia wiped down tables with slow, tired motions. The day had been long, and the tension from earlier, when the strange men visited, still lingered faintly in her chest, like the echo of a bad dream. She hummed softly under her breath as she cleaned, trying to calm her nerves. Her chestnut brown hair had fallen loose from its bun, brushing lightly against her cheeks. She looked worn but still gentle, her amber eyes reflecting a mix of determination and exhaustion. Outside, the street was quiet. Leon walked alongside Echo, the dog pacing with an alert, purposeful gait. Leon had his hands in the pockets of his jacket, eyes scanning the darkened windows of shops as they passed. He had learned long ago that danger never announced itself. It appeared as quietly as a shadow. Echo sensed his tension. The dog's ears flicked forward, and his steps slowed occasionally, checking their surroundings as if mirroring Leon's vigilance. "Easy," Leon murmured, his deep voice barely above a whisper. "We're just walking." But Echo could feel what Leon wouldn't say aloud. Something in the air felt off. As they approached Amber Brew, the sound of a metallic clang echoed faintly from the side alley beside the cafe. Echo stopped instantly, his body stiffening, head tilting toward the noise. Leon paused, his senses sharpened, the same way they had in Yemen during night patrols when everything looked peaceful until it wasn't. He heard faint voices, low, urgent, hostile. Without hesitation, he moved silently toward the alley, sticking close to the wall. Echo followed, soundless as a shadow. As Leon turned the corner, the sight before him snapped the calm of Crescent Bay in half. Mia was backed against the brick wall behind the cafe. Her hands were raised slightly, trembling. Her eyes were wide with fear, her breathing fast and shallow. Standing before her were the same three men from earlier, only now they weren't pretending to be customers. They were predators cornering prey. The lanky blond man held a small folding knife, its dull blade catching a stripe of moonlight. His expression was twisted into something far more sinister than the fake charm he'd worn inside the cafe. The heavy-set man gripped a steel baton, tapping it against his palm. The older man stood near the mouth of the alley, blocking any escape route with his broad frame and cold, calculating eyes. "I told you!" the lanky man hissed, stepping closer to Mia. "When we ask for help, we expect cooperation. It seems you don't understand simple things." "Please," Mia whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean any disrespect." "Don't lie," the heavy-set man growled, smirking. "You think you're too good for us, serving your fancy coffees, smiling at everyone except us." He reached out and grabbed her arm roughly. Mia gasped. The older man stayed silent, but his eyes remained fixed on her like a hawk watching a rabbit. Leon stepped forward slowly, silently placing his right hand on Echo's head. A firm, controlled pressure. A command. Wait. Echo's muscles quivered under the order, instincts pulling him to act, but training holding him in place. The lanky man raised the knife closer to Mia's chest. Maybe you need a lesson about respect. Mia's back hit the wall. She swallowed hard. Please don't. Before she could finish, the heavy-set man shoved her, causing her to fall hard onto the cold asphalt. She let out a small cry as her hand scraped against the rough ground. The sound slipped into Echo's ears like a blade. The dog let out a soft, trembling whine, low, distressed, barely audible. But to Leon, it was deafening. He saw Mia's terrified eyes. He saw the knife. He saw the raised baton. His blood turned cold. His voice became steel. Echo, go! Echo exploded forward like a bullet. The alley lit up with chaos. The heavy-set man barely had time to turn before Echo launched himself upward, clamping his jaws around the man's forearm, the one holding the baton. A deep, furious growl rumbled from Echo's chest as he twisted, forcing the man to drop the weapon with a cry of agony. "Get him off me! Get him off!" the man screamed, falling to his knees. The older man moved forward to help, but Leon was already there. Years of military training surged through his veins, awakening muscle memory buried deep but never forgotten. Leon closed the distance in 3 steps, striking with precision. His elbow slammed into the older man's jaw, sending him stumbling back in shock. The lanky man shouted, swinging the knife toward Leon. Leon dodged, grabbing the attacker's wrist with an iron grip. He twisted sharply. There was a sickening pop, and the knife clattered to the ground. The blond man howled in pain. Leon didn't hesitate. A hard knee to the stomach forced the air from the man's lungs, dropping him to the ground in a gasping heap. Meanwhile, Echo continued his controlled takedown. He didn't shake violently or tear into the man. His training made him efficient but not savage. He held the intruder down, forearm trapped firmly in his jaws, ensuring he could not reach for another weapon. Leon pivoted, keeping an eye on every angle, every shadow. The older man had regained balance and charged forward, throwing a wild punch. Leon ducked and countered with a swift palm strike to the man's throat. Not enough to kill, but enough to stun. The man wheezed and stumbled backward. He didn't get up. The heavy-set man, trapped beneath Echo, screamed and kicked, trying to shake the dog off. "I surrender! I surrender! Call him off!" Leon stepped closer, his presence commanding and cold. "Then stay down." The man froze, panting in terror. "Echo, hold!" Leon ordered. The dog loosened slightly but kept his grip, growling deep in his chest. Mia, still trembling on the ground, looked up at Leon with wide, horrified eyes, and then relief flooded her face so quickly that it almost broke her. "Leon!" she breathed. He turned to her immediately, helping her to her feet. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but tears pooled at the corner of her eyes. I'm okay. I thought..." Leon placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now?" Echo finally released his grip when Leon gave the command, stepping back, but staying between the attackers and Mia. His body was still tense, teeth bared slightly, eyes sharp. Leon walked over to retrieve the knife and baton, kicking them out of reach. The blond man groaned on the ground, clutching his wrist. "You're dead," he spat weakly. "You don't know who you're messing with." Leon crouched down beside him, voice quiet but terrifying. "You came after a woman alone. You were armed. You threatened her. I know exactly who I'm dealing with." The blond man swallowed hard, suddenly silent. The heavy-set man tried to sit up, but Echo growled, and he froze again. Mia wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as adrenaline waned. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered. "What do they want?" Leon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the alley, analyzing every detail, footsteps, dropped items, signs of surveillance. Something told him this wasn't random. It wasn't just drunken intimidation. This was deliberate, coordinated. "They're not from Crescent Bay," Leon said finally, "and they're testing boundaries." "Testing?" she echoed. "For what?" Leon looked down at the men, 2 groaning, 1 unconscious, and felt a familiar chill crawl up his spine. Territory, he said. Control. Mia trembled again, hugging herself tighter. This is a quiet town. None of this makes sense. Leon rose to his full height. Criminals don't care about what makes sense. They care about opportunity. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called for help. The flashing red and blue lights grew brighter as the patrol car approached. The men on the ground panicked. The blond man tried to crawl away, but Leon placed a boot firmly on the back of his jacket. Don't! Minutes later, 2 officers entered the alley. Officer Daniels, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with a neat beard and stern hazel eyes, and Officer Reyes, a short Latina woman with sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, and a confident, no-nonsense demeanor. Daniels surveyed the scene, eyebrows lifting slightly. Evening, Taylor, he said. Seems like you've been busy. Reyes knelt beside the blond man, checking his injuries. Looks like they picked the wrong night to cause trouble. Leon explained the situation calmly, while Mia confirmed everything, her voice shaky but honest. The officers arrested the 3 men, cuffing them and leading them toward the patrol car. As they were dragged away, the blond man glared back at Leon with venom. This isn't over? Leon didn't flinch. He simply stared until the man looked away. When the officers left, the alley grew quiet again. Mia sagged slightly, exhaustion taking over. Leon reached out to steady her. You should go home, he said gently. Get some rest. She nodded. Will you walk me? Leon hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Of course. Echo pressed close to Mia's leg protectively as they walked back toward the cafe's front entrance. She placed her hand on the dog's head, whispering, Thank you, Echo. You saved me. You... The dog wagged his tail once. When Leon reached her door, Mia turned to him. Her voice was soft. If you hadn't come when you did, I wasn't going to let anything happen to you, Leon said. She held his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, a gratitude deeper than words, and a fear that the quiet town they loved was no longer safe. Good night, Leon, she whispered. Good night, Mia. As Leon and Echo walked home, the wind felt colder, the shadows longer. Echo stayed close, glancing back now and then. Leon's mind raced, analyzing every angle, every possibility. This attack wasn't random. It was a message. And Leon had the sinking feeling it was only the beginning. In-story summary. Mia is attacked behind the cafe by the same 3 men who threatened her earlier. Leon and Echo intervene with decisive force. Echo takes down the armed attacker, while Leon neutralizes the others. Police arrest the men, but their final threat leaves Leon convinced this was not an isolated incident. The danger in Crescent Bay is growing. The moment the police cars disappeared down the street, the night felt strangely hollow, as if Crescent Bay itself was holding its breath. Leon stood beneath the dim street lamp outside Amber Brew, chest rising and falling slowly as adrenaline seeped from his body. Echo stood beside him, posture proud, but trembling faintly. The dog shifted his weight, and when Leon looked down, he saw it, the thin streak of dark blood slowly soaking into Echo's sable fur along his right shoulder. Damn it, Leon muttered, kneeling immediately. Echo's ear flicked, and the dog let out a low, muffled whine as Leon pressed his hand gently over the wound. The cut wasn't long, but it was deep enough to bleed steadily. The blade from the lanky attacker must have grazed Echo during the takedown. Mia gasped the moment she saw it. She dropped to her knees beside them, her hands trembling so badly she could barely keep them still. Tears pooled instantly in her amber-colored eyes. Oh God! Echo baby, look at you! Her voice cracked, small and raw. She stopped herself, placing a hand over her mouth as if trying to swallow her fear. Echo tried to lick her wrist, tail giving a faint attempt at a wag, but the movement cost him strength and he sagged into Leon's arm. Leon positioned himself so that Echo's head rested gently against his forearm. His voice steadied, becoming low and reassuring, an anchor in chaos. Easy, boy. I've got you. He looked up at Mia. We need to go, now. She nodded rapidly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, even as panic fought to break the surface. My car... Wait, no, your truck is closer. Right. Leon scooped Echo into his arms. Though Echo weighed around 70 pounds of muscle and bone, Leon lifted him with practiced ease, cradling him carefully against his chest, the way a soldier carries a fallen comrade. Without another word, he began moving toward the truck parked beneath the flickering streetlight. Mia ran ahead to open the passenger door. She was shaking so much that her fingers fumbled with the handle before it finally gave. Leon placed Echo across the seat as gently as he could. Echo whimpered, eyes half-lidded, breath shallow. Mia slid into the back seat, leaning forward to keep pressure on the towel Leon handed her, a clean cloth he kept in the truck. "Hold it there," Leon instructed, voice firm but gentle. "Not too hard, just firm enough." She nodded, tears blurring her vision, but she pressed down with the steadiness of someone forcing themselves to be brave. Leon closed the door, ran to the driver's side, and started the engine. The truck roared to life. He pulled out fast but controlled, tires spitting water as they sped down the slick road toward Crescent Bay's only 24-hour veterinary clinic on the far side of town. The roads were empty. Street signs flashed past. Leon's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles paled. His jaw was clenched so hard that a vein pulsed faintly along his temple. He kept his eyes forward, but his mind raced. He replayed every second of the attack, the knife, the confusion, the moment Echo lunged with loyalty stronger than fear. He should have anticipated the weapon. He should have moved differently. He should have... Leon. Mia's voice was quiet, fragile. He didn't answer immediately. "Leon," she whispered again. He forced himself to respond, voice hoarse. "Yeah? It wasn't your fault." His grip tightened. "I should have seen the blade." "No," she said firmly, choking back a sob. "He saved me, Echo saved me, and you saved both of us." He didn't respond, because the truth was too heavy. Leon Taylor had carried wounded teammates through gunfire. He had watched men die despite his best efforts. He had seen blood, heard last breaths, lived the guilt. And now he felt that same icy terror rising again, even though this time, the one bleeding was a dog. But Echo wasn't just a dog. Echo was the partner who tore through smoke to find him after the explosion in Yemen. Echo was the reason Leon was alive. "Stay with me, boy," Leon murmured. His voice wavered for the first time that night. "Don't you dare check out on me." Echo let out a small, pained exhale. Mia wiped her cheeks with her sleeve, the worry in her gaze piercing. "He'll make it. He's strong. He's the strongest dog I've ever known." Leon didn't reply. He pressed harder on the accelerator. After 13 agonizing minutes, the blue-lit sign of the veterinary clinic came into view. The building was small and modern, tucked between a pharmacy and a closed laundromat. A single security light glowed above the glass entrance. Leon pulled up sharply, threw the truck into park, and bolted out. He opened the passenger door and lifted Echo again, careful to support his shoulder. Mia ran ahead and pushed the clinic door open. The bell above it chimed with soft urgency. Inside was a clean, calming space painted in shades of pale green and white. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender cleaning spray. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman who blinked in shock as Leon rushed in. She was around 24, with dark curly hair pulled back into a ponytail, warm brown skin, soft round cheeks, and wide expressive eyes that sharpened quickly into professional focus. She wore navy scrubs with a small paw print logo on the chest. Her name tag read, Nadia Patel. "Emergency," Leon said, his voice deep, breath tight. "Dog, knife wound, lost a lot of blood." Nadia stood instantly. "Bring him to exam room 3. I'll call Dr. Whitaker right now." She led them quickly down a hallway. Her footsteps were brisk and controlled, hands already pulling on gloves. Leon laid Echo onto the metal examination table. Echo whimpered softly, his body trembling. "You're okay, sweetheart," Nadia murmured, her tone soothing as she examined the wound. "He's stable for now. Let's get pressure on it." Mia stood beside Leon, her hands clasped tightly together. Nadia worked calmly, applying gauze with a trained steadiness. "Doctor will be here in under 2 minutes. He lives right upstairs." Leon frowned faintly in surprise. "Upstairs?" "Yep," Nadia said quickly. "He likes being close to the clinic for cases like this." Before Leon could respond, the door burst open. A woman in her late 40s entered with hurried steps. She had tall, lean build, curly ash blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. pale skin dusted with small freckles, and green eyes sharp with intelligence but soft with empathy. Her navy scrubs were partially zipped, as if she had been woken suddenly. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Whitaker," she said, already assessing the bleeding wound. Her voice was steady, confident, the kind of tone that made people exhale in relief. "Let's get him stabilized. Nadia, prep sedation. Sir, hold his head gently. Dogs in shock can panic." Leon positioned himself at Echo's head. Echo recognized his touch and relaxed slightly. Mia stood behind Leon, hands on his back, grounding herself with his presence. Dr. Whitaker worked with swift efficiency. She numbed the wound, administered sedative, and began cleaning it. "He's lucky," she muttered. "The blade just missed the artery. Still deep, though. We'll need to stitch this and check for muscle damage." Leon closed his eyes briefly. A mix of relief and dread washed through him. Echo's breathing slowed as the sedative worked. His eyelids drooped. Leon leaned closer. "You're okay," he whispered. "I'm right here." Mia wiped her cheeks again. "He's so brave." Dr. Whitaker stitched the wound with practiced movements. "He's a fighter," she agreed. "What's his age?" 4, Leon answered. "Military working dog, retired." Dr. Whitaker nodded, not surprised. "Explains the discipline. Most dogs would be thrashing right now." After 20 minutes that felt like hours, she stepped back. "Okay, bleeding is controlled. He'll need fluids and monitoring overnight, but he'll make it." Mia covered her mouth in relief, tears escaping again. Leon let out a long breath, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since the alley. They moved Echo to a recovery room. The small space held soft blankets and gentle heating pads. Echo, now drifting in sedative-induced sleep, looked peaceful. Leon rested his hand lightly on the dog's side, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Good job, partner." Mia sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his arm. "Leon," she whispered, "you saved me, and Echo. I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head slowly. "Echo's the hero." His eyes softened. "He always has been." Their silence was warm, quiet, connected. They stayed with Echo until Dr. Whitaker insisted he needed rest. Leon and Mia stepped back into the waiting area. The night outside was still dark, but the tension in the air was lighter now. A fragile hope replaced the earlier dread. As they left the clinic, Leon glanced up at the sky. Clouds shifted, revealing a sliver of moonlight, faint, small, but steady. Much like the hope he felt. In-story summary. Echo is injured during the alley fight, and Leon and Mia rush him to the 24-hour veterinary clinic. Dr. Whitaker treats Echo's wound, stabilizing his condition. Leon and Mia stay by his side, sharing fear, relief, and gratitude. Echo survives the night, giving Leon a renewed sense of hope and deepening the bond between the three of them. The morning light over Crescent Bay slipped gently across the rooftops, turning the lingering traces of night into soft gold. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the quiet smell of sea salt drifting from the shore. Leon stood outside the veterinary clinic, hands in the pockets of his dark jacket, staring through the glass doors as the first rays of sun reached them. He had barely slept. His eyes showed faint shadows beneath them, a mix of exhaustion and the heavy residue of fear that still hadn't faded since the night Echo collapsed in his arms. Mia stood beside him, wrapped in a light gray cardigan. Her auburn hair, normally tied neatly, fell in soft waves that brushed her cheeks. She looked tired, but hopeful. The worry in her gaze had softened since the previous night, replaced with something steadier, something warm. Every now and then, she glanced at Leon as if checking whether he was breathing easier. He wasn't. Inside, muffled footsteps echoed in the hallway. The clinic had been quiet for hours, but the soft, deliberate movements meant someone was awake, someone caring for Echo. Leon straightened when the door opened. Nadia Patel stepped out, still in her navy scrubs from the night before. Her curls were slightly frizzed, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep, but her smile was bright. "He's waking up," she announced, slowly but steadily. Leon exhaled, a breath that seemed to release an entire night's worth of tension. "Can we see him?" Mia asked, voice trembling with relief. "Of course." Nadia gestured for them to follow. She led them through the quiet hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Dr. Whitaker is finishing his morning check. She'll go over the details with you." Leon and Mia entered the recovery room. The door had barely closed behind them when Dr. Evelyn Whitaker turned around. She looked more rested than earlier, now wearing a fresh pair of green scrubs. Her ash blonde hair was tied higher, revealing her sharp cheekbones and calm green eyes. "Good timing," she said with a small smile. "He's just coming out of sedation." She stepped aside, revealing Echo lying on a padded blanket. His chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths. Most of his right shoulder was wrapped in clean white bandages. His hind leg trembled slightly with each inhalation, but his body looked relaxed, safe. Leon crouched immediately. "Echo," he whispered. The dog stirred, ears flicking. Slowly his eyes fluttered open, amber brown, soft, but still burning with that steady spark Leon knew so well. When Echo lifted his head an inch, Mia let out a half sob, half laugh. "Oh my God! Echo!" She knelt beside Leon, brushing her fingers across Echo's cheek. Echo licked her hand weakly. His tail gave one small thump, then another. Leon gently placed his palm on Echo's head, thumb rubbing behind the dog's ear, Echo's favorite spot. "Told you he'd fight," Dr. Whitaker said. "A dog like this? He doesn't quit." Leon swallowed, the weight of emotion tightening his throat. "How's he doing? Honestly?" "Honestly?" Dr. Whitaker folded her arms. "Better than most dogs would be after what he went through. The muscle damage will heal. The stitches will come out in 2 weeks. He'll limp for a while, maybe longer, but—" She smiled. "He's tough, tougher than many people." Echo lifted his head fully now, sniffing Leon's jacket as if checking whether Leon was injured. When he confirmed Leon was intact, he relaxed again with a quiet huff. Mia laughed softly. "Look at him, still taking attendance like a little guardian." Leon nodded, emotion catching in his chest. For a moment, the only sounds were Echo's soft breaths and the gentle hum of machines around them. Then Dr. Whitaker cleared her throat. "You can take him home tonight," she said. "He needs rest, medication, no running, no stairs, and definitely no heroics. But he's stable. He'll recover best with his family." Leon blinked. The word struck him unexpectedly. Family. His gaze shifted instinctively toward Mia. She caught the look and flushed faintly. "We'll take good care of him," she told the doctor. Dr. Whitaker nodded as if she already knew. "I'll print the instructions. Nadia will help you with the paperwork." She stepped out, leaving the three of them alone. Leon sat back against the wall, finally letting his shoulders relax. "You scared the hell out of me, buddy," he murmured. Echo's eyelids drooped, but he nuzzled Leon's arm as if apologizing. Mia leaned closer, her sleeve brushing Leon's shoulder. "He's safe now," she whispered. "We all are." For a moment, neither moved. The quiet was soft, warm, the kind that felt like a fragile beginning. And later that day, after paperwork, instructions, and a final set of tests, Echo was cleared to leave. Leon carried him carefully to the truck. Echo insisted on lifting his head to look around, ears twitching with curiosity. Mia laughed through tears when Echo sniffed the air, as if trying to detect breakfast before anything else. "Still hungry for the world, huh?" She stroked his cheek. "You big brave hero." Leon settled Echo onto a thick blanket on the back seat. "Easy," he whispered as Echo adjusted himself. "We're going home." The drive back through Crescent Bay was slow. The sun was warm now, scattering golden light across the streets. People walked their dogs, opened shops, swept sidewalks. It looked like an ordinary morning, normal, peaceful, but the world felt different somehow, as if something heavy had been lifted, as if dawn itself had come for them too. When they reached Leon's small wooden house near the water, Mia hopped out first to open the door. Echo limped carefully beside Leon, leaning slightly against his leg. Inside, the house was simple and warm, a mix of deep wood, faded photographs, and the faint scent of cedar. Mia smiled softly as she looked around. "It feels like you," she said. Leon raised an eyebrow. "That good or bad?" "Good," she laughed. "Strong, quiet, steady." She hesitated, cheeks warming again. "Safe." Echo padded slowly to his favorite spot near the fireplace and curled up with a soft groan. Leon kneeled, adjusting the blanket under him. "You rest," he murmured. "No more saving the world tonight." Mia watched them with a tenderness she didn't bother to hide. When Leon stood, she noticed his hands were trembling again. Exhaustion mixed with lingering adrenaline, maybe even fear. She stepped closer. Leon, he turned. She reached up and brushed her thumb lightly along his cheekbone, where faint bruising from the fight had begun to show. "You're allowed to feel scared," she whispered. "Even the strongest men get scared when they almost lose someone they love." His breath hitched, barely perceptible. She didn't push, just let her hand rest over his. Leon swallowed hard. "Thank you for being there last night. For Echo. For both of you," she corrected softly. Echo thumped his tail at the sound of their voices, then let out a low sigh, as if giving them permission to continue talking without him. They both laughed quietly. To break the intensity, Mia raised her eyebrows. "Leon Taylor, are you going to offer your rescuer some dinner?" Leon stared at her for a second, startled, and then a small, genuine smile curved his lips. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I can do that." He cooked something simple, grilled chicken, vegetables, warm bread, the kitchen filled with soft clinks and sizzling sounds. Mia set the table, humming quietly. Leon found himself watching her as she moved, the gentle sway of her auburn hair, the way her eyes softened when she glanced toward Echo, the quiet determination in her posture. He realized he didn't remember the last time he'd felt this calm around someone, maybe ever. They ate together, talking about small things, the ocean, Mia's favorite pastries, Leon's terrible attempts at gardening. When Mia laughed, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Echo lifted his head, tail tapping in greeting. Mia knelt beside him, scratching gently behind his good ear. "Guardian," she whispered, "that's what you are." Leon leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching them. For the first time in days, maybe months, a quiet warmth flowed through him. "He is," Leon said softly. "My guardian." Echo blinked slowly, pride in his tired eyes. Mia looked up at Leon. "And you're ours." The room fell into a soft, glowing silence, the kind that didn't need words. Outside, the last light of the sun dipped beneath the horizon, and the house filled with the gentle rhythm of peace. Leon sat beside Mia, resting one hand on Echo's head. Echo leaned into the touch, eyes half closing. "Thank you," Leon whispered, "for fighting, for staying." Echo let out a soft huff, the closest thing to, "Of course I did, you idiot," that a dog could muster. Leon chuckled, rubbing his partner's ear. "Thank you, guardian." Echo raised his chin proudly. Mia rested her head lightly on Leon's shoulder. "A new dawn," she murmured. Leon looked at the two beings who had become his anchor in the world. "Yeah," he whispered, "a new dawn for all of us." In-story summary. The police capture the criminals, Echo recovers steadily, and Leon brings him home. Mia grows closer to both of them, sharing relief and warmth. That night, they share their first peaceful dinner together, forming a new bond and recognizing Echo as their brave guardian. A gentle, hopeful beginning unfolds for the trio. Sometimes miracles don't appear as flashes of light or angelic voices. Sometimes they come quietly, in the shape of a loyal dog who refuses to let darkness win, or in the unexpected kindness of a stranger, or in the strength we discover in ourselves when life forces us to stand between fear and hope. Echo reminded us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it is love choosing to fight. Leon reminded us that even the strongest hearts can be healed when they let someone in. And Mia reminded us that compassion can be the light that guides broken souls home. Life does not always give us grand moments to be heroes, but every day, in small choices, in patience, in kindness, in forgiveness, we become guardians for the people around us. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of all. If this story touched your heart, if Echo's courage or Leon's journey reminded you that hope still lives in this world, please take a moment to share the story. Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Your voice may be the spark that inspires someone who needs strength today. May God watch over you and your loved ones. May He protect those who protect others. And may He send His angels, sometimes with 4 paws and a wagging tail, to stand beside you in your darkest hours. God bless you. Amen.